Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Playing with Power MTG, where we play with the most powerful cards in the most powerful formats. Tonight's game is brought to you by TCGplayer.com, where you can find all of your cards online while still supporting local game stores. Dragon Shield for all of the best accessories to protect your decks, and through Patreon, where you get awesome benefits for your direct support. One of the biggest barriers to CEDH is, without a doubt, the cost. It is commonplace to see CEDH decks ranging in the thousands of dollars. Even some more of the modest lists still cost quite a lot of money. The CEDH community has done a great job to help with this barrier by providing resources and decks that are more budget conscious. There's even a dedicated website to this called budgetbrews.club. This website offers budget CEDH cards as well as entirely budget decks that can compete at CEDH tables. Their go-to figure for a budget is $500. We here at Playing with Power said, $500 is a great number, but how low can we go? We know that $500 is still a lot of money for a single CEDH deck, especially if you are just getting into the format. So we decided to issue ourselves a challenge. We said that we want to build some CEDH decks on a budget, but that budget isn't $500. Instead, we set out to build CEDH decks on a $100 budget. That's right, $100. We are not taking into consideration basic lands or the commanders themselves. The rest of the deck will be the factor of $100. Also, please note that prices fluctuate wildly over time. So while these decks are currently around $100, that's not to say they won't rise and fall in price. So if you happen to be watching this video a year later, note that these decks were $100 at the time of this recording. If you or your playgroup is looking to get into CEDH, we highly recommend you take a look at the deck lists below in the description. We hope that these decks will enable you to try out CEDH and see just how fun it can be. If you like this video and want to help out, please click the like button. If you want to see more, consider subscribing if you haven't already subscribed. If you are looking for more ways to help us out, consider signing up to our Patreon. We give all kinds of great rewards for your support, and you get to chat with us on our Patreon-only Discord. A link is in the description below. Thanks. Now, let's start out by showcasing our budget decks this evening. First, we have Ryan piloting Godo, Bandit Warlord. This deck currently costs around $2,000 to $2,500 to build completely budgetless. The cost comes mostly from the fast mana, land-based, and reserve list cards. Ryan stripped out all of the expensive mana and added more cost-effective, albeit slower, mana rocks and sources. He left a few more expensive pieces due to their effectiveness, like Krark Clan Ironworks. His swaps saved over $2,000 in this build while still keeping the original concept of the deck. Next, we have Garrett piloting the Gitrog monster. This deck currently costs over $6,500 to build completely budgetless. A large part of the cost comes again from the fast mana, mana-based, and some of the older cards on the list, like Bazaar of Baghdad, Chains of Mephistopheles, and Survival of the Fittest. Garrett's build took out all of these expensive cards. Interestingly enough, he decided to keep one of the Eldrazi Titans in the list in order to still ensure the core combo of the deck was kept intact. He used the Ebony Charm Wincon in his build, which was the Wincon the deck originally had before it was phased out for more efficient, albeit more expensive, Wincons. His swaps save over $6,000 in this build while still keeping the original concept of the deck. After that, we have Adam piloting the 4-color pairing of Thrasios Triton Hero and Vial Smasher the Fierce. This deck, called Curious Control or 4-color Rashmi, currently costs nearly $5,000 to build completely budgetless. A large part of the cost comes from the expensive 4-color mana base, the best counter magic, and the most efficient tutors. Adam's build took out the expensive mana base, but still kept a lot of the efficient Thrasios-themed advantage engines like Seedborn Muse, Biomancer's Familiar, and the Dramatic Scepter combo. He also kept the efficient Thassa's Oracle Demonic Consultation Wincon as well, but removed Tainted Pact due to budget. His swaps saved over $4,500 in this build while still keeping the original concept of the deck. Finally, we have Zach piloting Yuriko the Tiger Shadow. Other versions of this deck cost over $3,000 to build completely budgetless. A large part of the cost comes from the expensive lands, the best counter magic, and expensive fast mana. Zach's build took out all of these expensive cards for more budgetary versions. He kept the Thassa's Oracle combo with Demonic Consultation. He also kept some extra turn spells and delve spells due to their high converted mana cost synergy with the commander. His swaps saved around $3,000 in this build while still keeping the original concept of the deck. Without further ado, let's kick off this laborious laceration of these laudable lads. Garrett wins the wheat penny coin toss and gets to start us off. Garrett draws a card for turn and then plays a forest. He passes. Adam draws a card for turn and then plays a Dwar Isle Refuge, into play tapped, gaining 1 life. Adam passes. Zach draws a card for turn and then plays an island. He casts Gingerbrute. He attacks Garrett for 1 and then passes the turn to Ryan. Ryan draws a card for turn and then plays a mountain. He casts Rite of Flame, adding 2 red. He casts a Soul Ring. He then casts Seething Song, adding 5 red. He then casts Treasonous Ogre. Ogre resolves and Ryan pays 15 life and uses his remaining floating to cast Godo, Bandit Warlord. He fetches up Helm of the Host onto the battlefield, pays 15 more life to equip Helm onto Godo, and attacks for the win. Okay, well, that was pretty quick. So let's do another game where maybe Ryan doesn't draw the perfect opener this time. They shuffle up, and Ryan gets to start us off. Ryan draws a card for turn, and then plays a mountain. He casts a Soul Ring. Ryan passes. Garrett draws a card for turn, and then plays a forest. He passes. Adam draws a card for turn, and then plays a Dismal Backwater, into play tapped, gaining 1 life. Adam passes. Zach draws a card for turn, and then plays an Underground River. He taps Underground River to cast Ponder. He looks at the top 3, doesn't like what he sees, shuffles, and then draws a card. Zach passes the turn. Ryan draws, and then plays a mountain for turn. He casts an Golem's Eye. Ryan passes. Garrett draws, and then plays a swamp for turn. He casts a Rift Sweeper. Garrett gives a turn to Adam. Adam draws, and then plays a Temple of Abandon for turn. He scries 1 and passes the turn. Zach draws, and then plays a swamp. He passes. Ryan draws, and then plays a mountain for turn. He casts his commander, Godo, Bandit Warlord. Godo enters, and Ryan fetches up Helm of the Host onto the battlefield. Ryan then casts Magnetic Theft, targeting his Helm of the Host. In response, Zach taps his Underground River to cast Mistcast, countering the spell. Finished up, Ryan passes. Garrett draws, and then plays a forest for turn. He casts Wilt, targeting Helm of the Host. Helm is destroyed, and Garrett moves to combat. He attacks Adam with Rift Sweeper. Adam takes it, and Garrett passes the turn. Adam draws, and then plays an island for turn. He casts Dark Tutelage. Finished up, Adam passes. Zach draws, and then plays a swamp for turn. He casts a 4th Bridge Prowler. Zach passes. Ryan draws, and then plays a Buried Rune for turn. He casts Skirk Prospector. He casts a Commander Sphere. He attacks Adam with Godo. Godo triggers, and he untaps Godo. Adam takes it, and Ryan attacks Adam with Godo again in his second combat. Adam takes it again, and Ryan passes the turn. Garrett draws, and then plays a swamp for turn. He casts Culling the Weak, sacrificing his Rift Sweeper, adding 4 black. He casts his commander, the Gitrog monster. He casts Fork in the Road. He fetches up a forest into his hand and a swamp into his graveyard. Gitrog triggers, and Garrett draws a card. He plays a forest as his Gitrog land for turn and passes to Adam. During his upkeep, Adam reveals a Dissipate through his Dark Tutelage. He draws and then plays a forest for turn. He casts a Manolith. Adam ends his turn. At the end of Adam's turn, Zach taps his Underground River to cast Opt, scrying 1 and drawing a card. Zach draws and then plays an island for turn. He attacks Adam with his 4th Bridge Prowler. Adam declares no blocks, and before damage, Zach activates Yuriko, ninjutsuing it from the command zone onto the battlefield, returning the Prowler to his hand. Adam takes a hit, Yuriko triggers, and Zach reveals a blink of an eye off of Yuriko, with everyone losing 2. He recasts 4th Bridge Prowler. It enters, and Zach gives Gitrog -1/-1 until end of turn. He then pays 4 life and casts Dismember, targeting Gitrog, giving it an additional -5/-5, and killing it. All through, Zach passes the turn. Ryan draws and starts off his turn by casting Trash for Treasure, sacrificing his Golem's Eye. He returns Helm of the Host onto the battlefield. He activates the equip of Helm. In response, Garrett pays 4 life and casts Dismember, targeting Ryan's Godo. Godo dies, and Ryan moves to combat, attacking Garrett with Skirk Prospector. Garrett takes it, and Ryan passes the turn. Garrett draws, and then plays a Drownyard Temple for turn. He casts Rampant Growth. He fetches up a swamp onto the battlefield, and passes the turn to Adam. During his upkeep, Adam reveals a natural state from his Dark Tutelage. He draws, and then starts off by casting his commander, Vial Smasher the Fierce. He follows up by casting Keen Sense, targeting Vial Smasher. All through, Adam passes. Zach draws and starts off his turn by casting Dimir Charm, targeting Adam's Vial Smasher. In response, Adam casts Red Elemental Blast, targeting Dimir Charm. Vial Smasher's trigger goes onto the stack, and Zach responds to the trigger by tapping his Underground River to cast Blink of an Eye, targeting Vial Smasher. Blink resolves, Vial Smasher bounces, Vial Smasher's trigger resolves, and it deals 1 to Zach. Then Red Elemental Blast counters Dimir Charm. Zach then plays an island for turn. He attacks Garrett with his Prowler and Adam with Yuriko. Both take the hit, Yuriko triggers, and Zach reveals a Submerge from the top of his library, dealing 5 to each opponent. All finished up, Zach passes the turn. Ryan draws and starts off his turn by sacrificing his Skirk Prospector for red and tapping mana to recast his commander, Godo Bandit Warlord. Godo enters and Ryan fetches up a Hammer of Nazan onto the battlefield. Hammer triggers and Ryan attaches it to Godo. Ryan passes the turn. Garrett draws and then recasts his commander, the Gitrog monster. He plays a Ghost Quarter for turn. He plays a Swamp as his Gitrog land for turn. Garrett passes. During his upkeep, Adam reveals a Pyroclasm off of Dark Tutelage. He draws, decides to hold up mana, and passes the turn, discarding to hand size and putting Vial Smasher back into the command zone. Zach draws and then starts off his turn by casting Dream Cache. He draws 3 and puts 2 back on top. He attacks Adam with Yuriko. Adam takes it, Yuriko triggers, and Zach reveals Submerge again from the top of his library, with each opponent taking 5. With everyone cursing Dream Cache under their breath, Zach passes the turn. Ryan draws and then starts off by casting Arcane Signet. Ryan equips Helm of the Host onto Godo. Ryan attempts to move to combat and passes priority in his main phase. In response, Adam casts Izzet Charm, drawing 2 and discarding 2. With no further actions, Ryan moves the combat. Helm of the Host triggers, and with the trigger on the stack, Garrett responds by sacrificing his Ghost Quarter, targeting his own Drownyard Temple, hoping to draw into an answer. Gitrog triggers from the Ghost Quarter, and Zach responds to the trigger by tapping his Underground River to cast Liliana's Triumph. It resolves, Ryan sacrifices Godo, and Garrett sacrifices Gitrog. Then the Gitrog trigger resolves, and Garrett draws a card. Then Ghost Quarter resolves, Drownyard Temple is destroyed, and Garrett fetches up a Swamp onto the battlefield. Then Helm of the Host resolves, and Ryan creates a token copy of Godo. The Godo token ETB triggers, and Ryan fetches up an Argentum Armor onto the battlefield. Hammer of Nazan triggers to attach Argentum Armor to a creature. In response, Zach casts Submerge for free, targeting the Godo token. It bounces, Hammer's trigger fizzles, and Ryan passes the turn. Garrett draws and then plays a Dakmor Salvage for turn. He casts Kodama's Reach. He fetches up a Swamp onto the battlefield and a Forest into his hand. Garrett passes. During his upkeep, Adam reveals a Lobber Crew from his Dark Tutelage. He draws and then plays a Swiftwater Cliffs onto the battlefield tapped, gaining 1 life. He casts Lobber Crew and then gives a turn to Zach. Zach draws and then starts off by casting Wingcrafter. It resolves and Zach soul bonds it onto his Yuriko. He attacks Adam with Yuriko and Garrett with his Prowler. Both declare no blocks, and before damage, Zach casts Trickery Charm, targeting the Prowler. He changes its creature type to Ninja to get an extra Yuriko trigger. Then they both take the damage, Yuriko triggers twice, with Zach revealing a Ninja of the Deep Hours first, and then an Island second. In his second main phase, Zach casts Soothsaying. All through, Zach passes the turn. Ryan draws and then plays a Sequestered Stash for turn. He casts Ironcrag Feet, adding 7 red. He recasts his commander, Godo Bandit Warlord. In response, Adam casts Mana Leak, countering the spell. Thwarted again, Ryan passes the turn. At the end of Ryan's turn, Garrett activates Drownyard Temple from his graveyard, putting it onto the battlefield tapped. Garrett draws and then plays a Forest for turn. He recasts his commander, the Gitrog monster. It resolves, and Garrett casts Rain of Filth. This is a major problem for the table, because Garrett has Dakmor Salvage on the battlefield. So, in response, Zach activates Soothsaying's second ability where X equals 2, looking at the top 2 and rearranging. Zach then taps his Underground River to cast Abjure, sacrificing its Soothsaying as an additional cost. Abjure counters Rain of Filth, and Garrett passes the turn. During his upkeep, Adam reveals Cancel off of his Dark Tutelage. He plays a Swamp for turn and passes. Zach draws and then plays an Island for turn. He attacks Ryan with Yuriko, the Prowler, and Wingcrafter. Ryan declares no blocks, and before damage, Zach ninjutsus Ninja of the Deep Hours onto the battlefield, returning Prowler to his hand. Ryan takes the hit, Ninja of the Deep Hours triggers, and Yuriko triggers twice. With the triggers on the stack, Adam responds by activating Lobber Crew, pinging each opponent for 1. Yuriko's first trigger resolves, and Zach reveals a Ghostly Pilferer. Each opponent takes 2, and Adam dies. Zach then reveals a Changeling Outcast from Yuriko's second trigger, with each opponent taking 1. Then he draws a card off of Ninja of the Deep Hours. In his second main phase, he casts Changeling Outcast. He recasts his 4th Bridge Prowler and passes the turn. Ryan draws for turn and starts off by casting Faithless Looting. He draws 2 and discards 2. He flashes back Faithless Looting, drawing 2 and discarding 2 again. He casts Palladium Mirror and passes the turn to Garrett. During his upkeep, Garrett sacrifices Dakmor Salvage to Gitrog. Gitrog's draw trigger resolves, and Garrett replaces it with a Dredge from Dakmor Salvage. He mills Secure Tribe Scout and Forest. Gitrog triggers again, and Garrett draws a card. He draws for turn, and then casts Kenrith Transformation, targeting Yuriko. In response, Zach casts Anticipate. He looks at the top 3, puts 1 into his hand, and the rest on the bottom. Then Kenrith's Transformation resolves. Garrett draws a card, and Yuriko becomes a 3/3 Elk. Garrett plays a Swamp as his land for turn. He plays Dakmor Salvage as his Gitrog land for turn. All finished up, and with 2 cards in hand, Garrett passes the turn. Zach draws, and then plays an island for turn. He attacks Ryan with his Ninja of the Deep Hours, and Garrett with his outcasts, Yuriko Elk and Wingcrafter. Both take the hit, Zach draws off the Ninja, and in his second main phase, he casts Ghostly Pilferer. He then follows up by casting Thassa's Oracle. Oracle resolves, and to everyone's surprise, he lets the Oracle trigger resolve without pulling some consultation shenanigans. He looks at the top 6 cards of his library, puts 1 on top and the rest on bottom. Finished up, and everyone breathing a bit, Zach passes the turn. Ryan draws and starts off his turn by casting Krark Clan Ironworks. He taps mana and sacrifices 3 artifacts to recast Godo. It enters, and Ryan searches, finds no more equipment, and shuffles. He sacrifices 2 more artifacts to Krark Clan to equip Helm onto Godo. He moves to combat and passes priority, waiting for responses. With no more interaction left, Helm triggers, creates a copy of Godo, and Ryan demonstrates a loop of attacking with Godo tokens repeatedly for the win. That game was much more interactive, but the team has another game left in them, so let's see them go again, shall we? They shuffle up, and Adam gets to start us off. Adam draws a card for turn, and then plays a Jungle Hollow, gaining 1 life. Adam passes. Zach draws a card for turn, and then plays an island. He pays 2 life and casts Jataxian Probe, targeting Adam. He looks at Adam's hand and draws a card. He casts a Memnite. Zach passes. Ryan draws a card for turn, and then plays a mountain. Ryan passes. Garrett draws a card for turn, and then plays a Dakmor Salvage. This piques everyone's interest, and Garrett passes the turn. Adam draws, and then plays an island for turn. He casts Compost. Adam ends his turn. At the end of Adam's turn, Zach casts Op. He scries 1 and draws a card. Zach draws, and then plays a Swamp for turn. He attacks Adam with his Memnite. Adam declares no blocks, and then Zach activates Yuriko's Commander's Ninjutsu ability, putting it onto the battlefield, returning Memnite to his hand. Adam takes the damage, Yuriko triggers, and Zach reveals a Universal Automaton, pinging each opponent and putting it into his hand. In his second main phase, he recasts Memnite. Zach gives the turn to Ryan. Ryan draws, and then plays a mountain for turn. He casts Vessel of Volatility. Ryan passes. Garrett draws, and then plays a forest for turn. He casts Priest of Titania. Garrett also passes. Adam untaps, draws, takes no actions, and passes the turn. Zach draws, and then plays an Exotic Orchard for turn. He casts Aqueous Form, targeting Yuriko. He moves to combat and attacks Garrett with Yuriko and Memnite. Aqueous Form triggers, and Zach scries 1. Garrett declares no blocks, and Adam responds by casting Winds of Rebuke, targeting Yuriko. Yuriko bounces, everyone mills 2, including 2 dismembers from Zach and Garrett. Compost triggers twice, and Adam draws 2 cards. Still in the Declare Blocker step, Zach ninjutsus Yuriko back onto the battlefield, returning Memnite to his hand. Garrett takes the hit, Yuriko triggers, and Zach reveals Drown in the Lock and puts it into his hand. In his second main phase, he recasts Memnite. Zach passes the turn. Ryan draws, and then plays a mountain. Ryan passes. Garrett draws, and then plays a swamp for turn. He casts Far Wanderings. He searches up a forest onto the battlefield tapped. Garrett passes. Adam draws, and then plays a Temple of Epiphany, scrying 1 as it enters. He does nothing else, and passes the turn, discarding to hand size. During his draw step, Zach reveals a Temporal Mastery and casts it for its miracle cost. He plays an island for turn. He moves to combat and attacks Adam with Yuriko and Memnite. Adam takes a hit, Yuriko triggers, and Zach reveals an island and puts it into his hand. In his second main phase, he casts Universal Automaton. He follows up with a Slither Blade, and then passes the turn to himself. Zach draws, and then plays a swamp for turn. He moves to combat and attacks Garrett with Yuriko and the Automaton, and attacks Adam with Memnite and Slither Blade. Both take the hit, Yuriko triggers twice, and Zach reveals a Sunken Hollow and a Changeling Outcast, putting both into his hand. All finished up, Zach passes. Ryan draws, and then plays a mountain for turn. He casts a Mind Stone. He casts a Goblin Engineer. Engineer enters, and Ryan fetches up a basalt monolith into his graveyard. Ryan passes. Garrett draws, and then plays a swamp for turn. He taps his Priest of Titania for 2, since Universal Automaton is technically an elf, and casts his commander, the Gitrog monster. He plays a swamp as his Gitrog land for turn, and ships the turn to Adam. Adam draws, and then plays a Temple of Abandon, scrying 1 as it enters. He casts Teamer Banner. Adam passes. At the end of Adam's turn, Zach flashes in Notion Thief. It resolves, and still in the end step, Ryan sacrifices his mountain to cast Thunderclap, targeting Notion Thief, killing it. Then Zach moves to his turn. Zach draws, and then plays a Sunken Hollow into play untapped. He moves to combat and attacks Garrett with Slitherblade, Adam with Yuriko, Memnite, and the Automaton. Both take the hit, Yuriko triggers twice, and in response to the first trigger, Zach casts a Mere Charm, choosing the third mode as he casts it. He looks at the top 3, puts 1 on top, and the other 2 into the graveyard. Then Yuriko's triggers resolve, and Zach reveals a Telling Time, and reveals a Ponder, putting both into his hand. With nothing else, Zach passes. Ryan draws, and then plays a mountain for turn. He casts Flame Shadow Conjuring. It resolves, and Ryan passes the turn. At the end of Ryan's turn, Garrett casts Mausoleum Secrets. He fetches up a Putrid Imp into his hand. Adam's Compost triggers, and Adam draws a card. Still in the end step, Garrett casts Nature's Claim, targeting Compost. Compost is destroyed, and Adam gains 4 life. Then the turn moves to Garrett. During his upkeep, Garrett's Gitrog trigger goes onto the stack. Zach responds by casting Reality Shift. Gitrog is exiled, and Garrett manifests the top card of his library. Then Gitrog's trigger resolves, and Garrett does elect to sacrifice Dakmor Salvage to put it into his graveyard. During his draw step, Garrett dredges 2 to return Dakmor back to his hand. In his main phase, he recasts the Gitrog monster. He plays a swamp for turn. He then casts Putrid Imp. In response, Zach casts Drown in the Loch, targeting Gitrog. Gitrog is destroyed, and Putrid Imp resolves. Garrett passes the turn. Adam draws, and starts off his turn by casting Ponder. He looks at the top 3, rearranges, and draws a card. He plays a Dwar Isle Refuge, gaining 1 life. He casts Sultai Banner. Adam ends his turn. Zach draws, and also starts off his turn by casting Ponder. He looks at the top 3, rearranges, and draws a card. He plays an island for turn. He moves to combat, attacking Adam with his Automaton, Yuriko, and Memnite, and attacks Garrett with his Slitherblade. Both declare no blocks, and Zach responds by activating Ninja of the Deep Hours, ninjutsuing it onto the battlefield, returning Memnite to his hand. Both players take the damage, Ninja of the Deep Hours triggers, and Yuriko triggers 3 times. Zach reveals a counterspell, draws a card off of Ninja of the Deep Hours, and then responds to his second Yuriko trigger by casting Telling Time. He looks at the top 3, puts 1 into his hand, 1 on top, and 1 on bottom. He then reveals an island off the second Yuriko trigger. Yuriko's final trigger resolves, and Zach reveals another island. In his second main phase, he recasts Memnite. Zach passes the turn to Ryan. At the end of Zach's turn, Ryan activates Goblin Engineer, sacrificing his Mind Stone and returning Basalt Monolith onto the battlefield. Ryan draws, and then starts off his turn by casting Strionic Resonator. Ryan asks if Zach wants to counter that, but Zach lets it resolve. Ryan then casts a Prismatic Lens, and gives the turn to Garrett. Garrett draws, and then plays a Forest for turn. He recasts the Gitrog monster. In response, Adam casts Mana Leak, countering the spell. Thwarted again, Garrett passes. Adam draws, and starts off his turn by casting Preordain, scrying 2, and drawing a card. He plays an island for turn. He casts his commander, Thrasios, Triton Hero. Adam passes. At the end of Adam's turn, Zach cycles Baron Moore, drawing a card. Zach draws, and then plays a command tower for turn. He casts Winds of Rebuke, targeting Garrett's Manifest token. The Manifest bounces, and everyone mills 2. Zach moves to combat and attacks Garrett with his Ninja of the Deep Hours, Automaton, Yuriko, and Memnite, and attacks Adam with Slitherblade. Both take the damage, and multiple attackers trigger. Zach draws a card off of Ninja of the Deep Hours. Zach then reveals a Tainted Isle, Liliana's Triumph, and Portent off of Yuriko, putting them all into his hand. In his second main phase, he casts Changeling Outcast. He casts Portent, looking at the top 3 and deciding to shuffle. Zach passes the turn, discarding to hand size. During Ryan's upkeep, Zach draws a card off of Portent. Ryan draws and starts off his turn by casting his commander, Godo, Bandit Warlord. Zach responds by casting Counterspell, countering Godo. With nothing else, Ryan passes the turn. Garrett draws and then plays an Emergence Zone for turn. He casts Kenrith's Transformation, targeting Zach's Yuriko. Yuriko is Elk, and Garrett draws a card. Garrett casts Colony Heart Expedition. He casts Farseek. He fetches up a swamp onto the battlefield, giving his expedition a counter. Garrett passes the turn. Adam draws and then plays a command tower for turn. He casts his other commander, Vial Smasher the Fierce. Adam passes. At the end of Adam's turn, Zach casts Impulse. He looks at the top 4, puts 1 into his hand and the rest on the bottom. During his upkeep, Zach casts Spy Network, targeting Adam. He looks at Adam's hand, the top card of Adam's library, and then the top 4 cards of his own library, rearranging. He draws and then plays a Tainted Isle for turn. He moves to combat, attacking Adam with Slitherblade and Changeling Outcast, and Garrett with Ninja of the Deep Hours, the Automaton, Memnite, and his Elk Yuriko. Both declare no blocks, and Zach responds by casting Village Rites, sacrificing his Elk Yuriko, putting it into the command zone. He draws 2 cards and then activates Yuriko's ninjutsu ability, putting it onto the battlefield, returning Memnite to his hand. Both take the damage, and then Zach's creatures trigger. He draws a card off of Ninja of the Deep Hours. He reveals a Dimir Infiltrator, a Dig Through Time, a Thought Scour, and a Swamp. In his second main phase, he recasts Memnite. He dredges 8 and casts Temporal Trespass, getting an additional turn. He cycles Lonely Sandbar, drawing a card. He casts Preordain, scrying 2, and drawing a card. He passes the turn to himself, discarding to hand size. Zach draws and starts off his turn by transmuting Dimir Infiltrator. He fetches up a Negate into his hand. He plays an island for turn. He casts Liliana's Triumph. In response, Ryan sacrifices his Vessel of Volatility, adding 4 red. He activates Goblin Engineer, sacrificing his Prismatic Lens, and returns Sol Ring to the battlefield. Then everyone sacrifices a creature. Zach declares he would like to move to combat, and Ryan spends his floating red to untap his Basalt Monolith. Zach attacks Ryan with everything. Ryan takes the hit, and Zach's creatures trigger. He draws a card through Ninja of the Deep Hours. With his first Yuriko trigger on the sack, Zach responds by casting Brainstorm. He draws 3 and puts 2 back on top. Zach then resolves his Yuriko triggers, revealing a Dig Through Time with everyone taking 8 and killing Garrett and Adam. Zach then reveals a Submerge with Ryan taking 5, and Zach wins the game. Ladies and gentlemen, what a set of games that was. We set a challenge to see if we could create competitive decks on limited budgets. We definitely feel that tonight's games showed you that you could still build and play CEDH without breaking the bank. While we would definitely admit that not all CEDH strategies and decks can be built on a $100 budget, we had a great time playing with these decks that night. We even feel that a few of them could make a decent showing at a normal CEDH table. If you are looking to get into CEDH with your friends, but are worried about budgetary restraints, we hope that you take this video and these deck lists and see that you don't need thousands of dollars to play CEDH. We wanted to demonstrate that CEDH is more of a spirit of play than a list of decks or a pool of cards. It's how you approach the game. We challenge anyone watching this video to try and build a $100 budget deck of your own. Check out our deck lists and links in the description for some inspiration. If you liked tonight's video, give us a like and consider subscribing if you haven't already subscribed. If you want to help us out further and play some budget CEDH with us on our Discord, sign up to our Patreon. We have monthly Discord get-togethers where we play webcam CEDH with our patrons. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Tune in next time when we duke it out to see who will be king of the budget competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time. Okay, I wanted to give a special shout out to our patrons Brandon Harper, Dustin Maye, Josh Kovach, CountStorm123, Josh Kopp, Baby Jeebus, Mox Rob, Trey Payne, Rakeko, Baskin, Greg, Zods, Noah Saldana, Wayan, Isaac Kaja, Spielrahu, ooh boy, oh lord, Rod Grod Medflode? Let's just go with that. CZ and Nick. Thanks a lot, you guys are the best.